I'm Jase Clamp, and as my background is, I had a agency over in the States, like a web development agency, and we were based near DC. Had that for about 10 years, and we had an office in Tennessee as well. And we did web application development, mobile apps, like subscription platforms, e-commerce sites, some big ones, like a lot of smaller ones on all sorts of different platforms. So, we leveraged a lot of open source, and we built, using various frameworks and things like that. So I think, what I learned from that was, I've been on a journey trying to figure out what equals product success, really, as many people working in digital and kind of technical fields are. We'd have customers coming through the door and ask us to build XYZ, and sometimes they'd done their research and it would be a really good idea, but other times I would just know this is not a great idea to build this thing, So sometimes we try and help them along the way with a bit of research and a bit of guidance with their product. And a few times we even went ahead and built it because they were so passionate. They really wanted to get a prototype out. They wanted to test their idea, and then we'd see that fail, because of whatever reason that we could see, So towards the end, before I sold the agency over back in 2011. I actually started turning down jobs here and there if they came in like that, and just sort of couldn't kind of move forward with that. So what I'm doing right now is whatever I can to help product be done better here in Brisbane. I think Brisbane's a really good. There's sort of a trend of a lot of people sort of coming in to move into Brisbane because it's just a really nice standard of living here, and it's a good opportunity. So. I have my agency where I'll go into companies that have been in business, say 10 plus years, and I'll help them sort of incubate product concepts in situ, like right there, and help them understand how to put their team together. Oftentimes it might be, a company that's doing managed service or something like that, and they now want to create a product and take that to market. So I'll work with them on the go-to-market plan, and help them to do the research and find where's the gap in the market for them, and what is it that they're actually going to build, like who are their customers, and what kind of journey are they on with that. I also do a product community, which is it's a meetup. We meet like every month-ish. It's called Product Tank. So our next one's May 23rd. You can find that at worldproductday.com. So it's basically 95 plus cities around the world that meeting on one evening to talk about product management and how the whole field of doing a good job of building product. So check that out if you like. So also why I sort of do speaking and do things like this as well. I've got a typical agile user story. Agile being a methodology for building out projects and software and so on. As an engineer, I can from time to time step in and do the job of a product manager and define a product so that we don't end up with crap or something that misses the mark for the business or doesn't actually work really well for the customer. Or another story could be, as an engineer, I can let my product manager or my CEO or my leadership know what I expect of them in terms of what is a good approach for them to define the product so that we all don't end up with something that misses the mark. So this is why I'm here and sharing this talk. So yeah, basically, like in terms of what is product, like this simple illustration, I frame my thinking around it all the time. Anytime I'm kind of looking at something big and new and getting situated, I always just work my way around this triangle, work my way around. This is the only thing I need to remember to do a good job. So product, to me, like the realm of product management and the role of product manager or product owner is an actual role in Agile or Scrum, so it's the person who defines the what in a separate fashion to how that problem is going to be solved. So for example, CEOs play the role of product manager. They're often out there talking to customers, defining the problem that they're trying to solve, defining the mission that their company is on, and then they'll bring that in, hopefully well defined as a problem and clearly validated to the engineering department, sometimes led by a CTO or something of that nature. And then that group has to figure out, well, the how, and then woven all through that is this concept of project management, which is really, it's about, figuring out what are all the things that need to happen to make this happen, who's going to do it, when's it going to happen, what sequence is it going to be in, what's dependent on what, and organizing that whole thing, right? So as that's happening, having the ability to kind of see when those involved are doing a good job at defining product and how they're going about that in a sense will provide a whole upliftment to everyone involved, So as an engineer, I can get stuck into questioning this thing that's been brought to me and having a framework to have conversations about that let me really get to the bottom of why are we doing this thing. So product manager was always going to start with the business, right? So understanding that a product manager, his first and foremost commitment is to the business, to accomplish the goals that the business wants to accomplish. And really, a good product manager is going to come in and they're going to meet with the leadership and they're going to really get to the bottom of what the goals are. And this is, I think sometimes it's easy, it's sort of in a technical field, potentially to come in and make some assumptions as to, we all know why we're here. That's not necessarily the case. And I vaguely recall that you've already been over sort of this whole essential aspect of getting goals straight and getting them aligned. So that's one sort of framework. And I'll talk about a few other frameworks where a good sort of approach to developing an understanding of what is this product. There's some other frameworks that you can use to establish understandings up front and then proceed with those through the delivery of whatever the project is. And then secondly, of course, is customers. So that ability to just to go out there and really intimately understand the problem to be solved for the customer, and actually validating, well, is this, we could get excited about a solution, but is this an actual problem that customers are really having, and how painful is it for them? So in the course of my career, we would get customers in of all different sizes and do focus groups with them, do workshops with them, and I can remember times where maybe one of the product managers on my team would get really excited about some sort of technical opportunity that they might be seeing. So for example, like we could push, live 15-minute shipping prices into your eBay and then we've got the customer sitting there and I can tell they're not really resonating with this idea. And then I'm like, hang on, let's just stop. I don't feel like you're really excited. Why is that? And then they say, well, 90% of our shipping prices are free. It's free shipping. So obviously it's not a very painful problem for us that, we have a lag on actual shipping cost when it does go to that 10% of those who are paying. So just taking the time to really validate, like, there is a pain point, there is a problem. And I'll get into that also a little bit more because this is sort of, a lot hangs off of this. And then the technology is that which undergirds everything and what it's all delivered through, the construction of software or a physical product that's going to go, and solve a problem, be on site, whether it be in a mine or, in an industrial concept or whatever. Technically anything's possible with enough time and money. So it's about, that's never available enough, unlimited time and money, it's never available. So it's about how can we put a definition around what we're doing. So in terms of, like I said before, that framework of coming into the group and really nutting out what the goals are, I spent a couple of years working with I've always had sort of like a soft spot for traditional companies that have a really good core, like either like a good sales team, like a good presence or, good level of service. But then I see, wow, look at what digital transformation could do for them. Or if we gave them a new lick of branding paint or a new kind of optimization on their processes, wow, we could really take this to the next level. So I was working with a group for a couple of years and, their distributor, B2B, and really just took them through that transformation where they went from having like a stack of paper catalogs on their desk to having, 250,000 products all in their ERP and on their front end and e-commerce and integrated with CRM and, customers able to kind of dial in and build their quotes and track their orders and all this crazy stuff to get to the end of that and kind of, I'd had sort of a briefing with the CEO, but then all the general managers in the company, I'd get to the end of that sort of very long project implementation and really learn that they're not really that excited about that approach. They really just like the traditional approach anyway. So, you know, in a sense, really being excited about the how we can solve a problem, but kind of missing that whole, do these people really want to solve it? So the goals, the overarching vision, making sure that's absolutely crystal clear, and not really feeling sheepish about pushing back on that and asking questions about the vision and mission, and also articulating if stuff's straying outside of that, you know, pointing that out. You know, I think a mistake that I made earlier on in my career is making the assumption that someone else is thinking about this, someone else is going to have this figured out. So really nutting down on what that is, and then with the thing that we're executing in here, you know, does it fall within that? So obviously, with the customer being part of that product triangle that I refer to, they're very important. Like, who is this thing we're doing, this product we're putting together, who is it for? You know, and in software development, which is where I come from, establishing that up front as well, and getting everyone to agree to it, especially in early stages of, you know, we've got this great idea and we're going to go out and disrupt the world. You know, it's easy for the leadership to get distracted and think, well, everyone's our customer. That can't be the way that, you know, a technical project is focused in the early stages. There must be a clear definition around who the customer is. So for example, I want to build a car for someone to get to work. Well, do they live in the Sahara or do they live in London? You know, it's a different kind of car we're going to build for them in both of those situations. And I'll use that example a lot. Also talking about like the profile of the organization, I found, especially once again in software development, big enterprise companies, like in any given industry, there's going to be like a dozen enterprise players in that industry. And, you know, in pursuing that market, the technical solution that is being built for them, the product, is probably going to have to be highly customizable, right? Because every single one of them, it's going to be a big project, this big long, year-long of customization and kind of getting it to fit into their massive enterprise. So that product needs to be built in sort of like a toolkit kind of way, you know, where you can take these pieces and configure them. And a lot of thinking about that product is going to also be thinking about the way that product is taken into with that customer, like how that customer is onboarded. That's part of their experience, you know. So it may not just be about the thing that is being programmed or engineered, built to solve the problem. It's about how it's actually taken into their organization and pieced together. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, we got the smalls and the micro type organizational profile. You know, as an organization, they might be quite willing just to take something off the shelf and use it, and they're just thankful that there's a pattern of process that they can follow within that product. You know, and they can buy something that actually gives them structure, and they'll follow the lead of that product or that software. You know, and then there's everything sort of in between that. So I feel like what I'm seeing in software development is that there's sort of a number of spectrums. You know, everything from I'm going to build a UI kind of first product to I'm going to build an API type first product that's going to be technical, you know, electronic data and in the way it's accessed that provides for more technical people to consume it. Or I'm going to design this product where, because a lot of people are using it, it's really going to be self-service. Like I've been consulting with a company where they're now in their 4th iteration of product, and they've gone through this evolution where they started out with sort of like, we'll do it for you. You know, here's the basics. Any changes you need, call us. We're happy to do it. We'll customize it. And then that customer base getting kind of frustrated and saying, why do we have to pay you to customize? And they're saying, well, we're here for you, you know? So then version 2, they brought out, do it all yourself, you know? And then once again, they found the customers calling them and saying, well, I don't want to do it myself, you know, I'm too busy, you know, I couldn't be bothered with this technical thing you've put in place. So now they've arrived somewhere in the middle where they have invested to a degree in the self-service and configuration, but they've allowed for an element of managed service within that as well. in terms of getting to know the customer, what I found is going on site with them, understanding their profile, understanding the challenges that they work with. I can, as a product person, I can see clearly when this is missed. I can feel like, oh, the engineer must just not have actually come on site and tried to do this thing where I'm at. I was talking with a well-known app for ordering coffee recently, and was kind of telling them, look, you need to get your UX guys, and get them to walk down the street with that mobile phone in their hand and try and order a coffee. And you see what it's like versus sitting down in front of a screen and trying to design that process. So even little changes, like I feel like Google does a good job at user experience, for example, and understanding the use case of the customer. And I tend to use Google Maps a lot. And I just noticed that they changed their fields in the directions, the from and the to. Instead of having a white background, now it's blue and blue with white text, and it's just easier to see. It's just little things that indicate an understanding of the customer. So when founders get excited and say, we're going to go out and we're going to dominate the micro market, and we're going to be the next whatever, the next freemium, the next MailChimp or something, we're going to disrupt email. What I'll often say to that as well is go have a look at Crunchbase, the TechCrunch database of all these companies that have launched like that and gotten funding. And for those companies to go out and dominate a micro market has taken like 400 or 500 million in funding for them to really push that and get their message out. So I find that a lot of scrutiny needs to be overlaid around who the customer is and what the approach might be to equal success for this thing. So as someone who's delivering product, or engineers will work in Agile, especially they'll work from a backlog. And I've in my consulting, I've worked with product teams where I'll go in and sit down with them, and the product owners will say, oh man, my backlog is just so long, there's just not enough time for us to really clearly define all the things in there, we're just getting so many requests in. And I say to them, well, who actually owns this product? Is it sort of everyone kind of having their way and pulling it around like a rag doll, or is there a dedicated product owner that's been identified that really has taken the time to understand the vision, the mission of this organization, the goals for this particular product, who the customer is, and you blend that all together, and you really understand the soul of that product and the journey that it's on. So one of the sort of elements of the consulting I'm doing at the minute is that every product is its own thing, and it needs to walk its own unique and bold path and kind of reach its summit and all of that. So that person who can really, and I've kind of come to understand this as well, having kids, I notice that we go shopping and they want to buy everything. Literally everything that they see on the shelf, I'm like, why do you want to buy everything? You don't need it, And I feel like sometimes CEOs and leadership, they'll get really excited, about what it is they want to do, and they're really genuinely trying to help. We'll sit there and come up with all these ideas and say, we're going to throw this in and this in, and it's going to be so exciting. Well, it's more about, do we want sort of a cargo ship that's just stacked up with so much stuff that we might make it to our destination, or do we want that speedboat that's really going to get us to our goal faster? So it's about coming up with that, given that you've established those frameworks ahead of time of, what are our goals, who are our customers and all that, what's our mission, being able to get into those conversations regarding, we need to know when to say no. Good strategy is about knowing when to say no to things. If you are in fact actually trying to summit a mountain, I recently read Tony Hsieh's Zappos, the story of him creating that company. It's a big shoe website over in the States, and he talks about when he tried to he went and climbed Kilimanjaro, and he would play these games in his head just to try and get to the next step, and just do whatever he could to break up the journey to the summit into these segments, and all the prep that went into only taking what was needed, and really staying focused. I've just seen so many companies run out of resource and not actually make it to the finish line because they got a little distracted. So as a person managing a project like that, having mechanisms to identify that, and really having a bit of guts to go in and say, look, I'm going to challenge this. I don't want to be obnoxious, but we're all working on this together, and I'm really going to challenge whether this is needed and whether this is going to be the thing that's going to keep us on track. And this is sort of like a whole set of thinking that you go through before you kind of get into the nuts and bolts even. So the things I'm sort of explaining here are more like concepts in terms of things that I've condensed down through my experience and explaining the why. These principles that I've learned that can be applied as tools. It's not necessarily a process or do things in this sequence. It's the why, and then drilling into kind of exposing that to what you're doing as you do it. So in terms of customer research, talked about going out and talking to customers, being with them on site, getting to know their profile. And then once you sort of have that understanding, I found that before getting into a really technical way of writing up the specs, before creating the Gantt chart and the project plan, I'm actually a big fan of Gantt charts in terms of actually getting to a time threshold and getting stuff done and seeing dependencies, even though it's not typically a tool you see in Agile. I think it's quite useful. Before any of that happens, just opening up a doc and thinking, as a customer, what are the jobs I need to do here with this thing? What are the key things I really want to accomplish? I've also been talking with an organization recently that has sort of a community engagement app, and they've taken something off the shelf in the States and tried to repurpose that and kind of wedge it into their organization. It's a massive organization with just hundreds of thousands of members globally, and I've had to say to them, look, your constituents had a few jobs they wanted to do. They just wanted to see the other people in the organization, connect with them, form groups, communicate, understand what the events were, and that was it, right? And, just simply sitting down with a blank page and saying, what are the jobs people need to do with this thing, just so we can be clear on that before really starting to build anything is really important. An aspect of research is also going to be looking at the competition. So if customers' needs are going to be really well met through options out there, it's a given you're going to have to go into the market eventually and explain, well, why shouldn't I use this? Why should I use your thing? So there is going to be competitive research, right? But the thing that I've learned in that is it can be a bit of a trap to fall into in terms of sitting down, looking at all the competition, and sort of getting like a competitor research diarrhea happening, right? Where you're just starting to like smash together all the competitors' feature lists and build comparison grids and things like that. To me, what's more important is talk to the customer first, figure out where the unmet needs are. And that can even be something as simple as going on forums of the competition and just reading and starting to feel like there's a theme here, there's an unmet need. I'm working with a company on, they're rolling out sort of a data-related product, and just been seeing trends in terms of the way, I feel like this is actually quite critical because companies building product, they'll start to look at the way everyone else is doing it and start to somehow maybe get an assumption in their head that that's the way it's done. And by doing so, they're missing an opportunity. So in this particular landscape we're looking at right now, there's dozens of customers that are all solving a particular problem in the same way. In a sense, they're trying to build certain facilities in-house instead of opening up and creating an ecosystem and whatnot. So we've sort of discovered this as one of the market opportunities for them, right? And once we discover these opportunities, that's when we look at the competition and we start to grade them against the things that we think are the opportunity and the points of differentiation. And that gives us a much simpler matrix to, we'll put these are our 5 points of differentiation. We think now we're going to go and validate, and there might be a partial match, but we know how we're going to do that better. So you come up with this matrix that gives you the true, here you've established your mission of your product up here, and then you've listed out the competition here, and you have sort of a picture now, a real picture that's matched against your product, not against everyone else's idea of what that particular product should be. So in terms of solution design, that being a separate thing to the identification of here's a list of all the problems that we're trying to solve. So it's a really good idea not to get stuck on a solution. As a product person myself, I get really excited about thinking that I know what the best way of solving this is going to be. But really what I need to do is clearly identify the problem and its criticality to the customers, and then work with the engineering team and actually go through a process of brainstorming, especially when it's a major sort of top line feature that is going to be delivered. So for example, I've done a project recently where there was this aspect of customers feeling a little nervous about currency fluctuations, and we'd sort of built into the system the concept that we could freeze things and have exceptions and refunds and things like that, when really the best option for us in this whole platform and service that we're concepting was this idea of just currency insurance. So we can work with an insurance provider, and they can basically provide insurance to those that might be nervous, and that's problem solved. So I came in there with this idea of how we might solve the problem, ended up being completely different, and then including a partner with which we could actually get a bit of revenue share and make more money in the end, which was good. So I really appreciate it when I meet a new company or startup that's doing a good job of the concept of minimum viable product. I spoke with a guy through this community that I do recently he's got this product that the intent of it is to organize drone licenses. Okay, so as drones become more and more of a thing, the government needing sort of a technical solution to manage those people who now want to get commercial licenses and what airspace they're granted to operate in. But his actual MVP was backed up by a spreadsheet and just a lot of manual work. So he was basically working through all these blockers of the legislation and establishing the network and stuff without really going into a lot of effort of building an actual solution. And then once he's prototyped his product, then he goes and builds it, which is fantastic. I've also used a product called Envision in the past, where I'll sit with a designer. It's cheap to come up with just Photoshop type designs for interfaces and things like that. And in Envision, we'll make them all clickable and navigable. And we'll go and sit down with a customer. And boy, am I glad that we would do that, because there were those handful of situations where, in spite of us thinking we knew the customer, we would get in there and they'd say, look, we would never use this. This is a piece of junk. So it's a very good step to do before that build actually happens. So in an organization, also, engineering can be, often is just a department with an organization. And that entire organization is there to serve the customers. So as a person leading a project, even from within the technology department, I found it's absolutely critical that before you really get into that final phase of planning and execution and delivery, to do the rounds and say, look, here's either a list of things that we've got on our docket that we've defined now. We think these are in delivery. We're about to take them into planning and execution. But what do you need? Hey, finance, what do you know? Are you going to need to do any different process to support this? A different angle on the subscription or some method of recording. Hey, legal, we're going to roll these things out. Does this impact our agreements? Just have a look through these one-pagers, these briefs that I've done up that explain what this is and why it is that we're doing it and what we hope to achieve out of it. doing those rounds, it's again operations, those who are going to have to be responsible for maintaining and looking after support. Sometimes, unfortunately, I feel like those departments get left out, and they end up having to hear about things at the last minute and quickly scramble to, and I've literally spoken with some of the biggest organizations in the world delivering #1 in category software, and I've had their support and ops team tell me this, that they have to scramble to understand new product components that are being delivered. And then really creating that sense with the whole team that, look, this is something we're doing together. This is our product that we are delivering together. When it comes time for them to actually support it, it'll make it a whole lot easier, a whole lot. Everyone's totally across it already and feels included and can feed back their requirements. So now that we feel like we understand what we're trying to achieve, we've spoken to customers, we've done some prototyping, we've just written up the simple things the customers are trying to achieve and validated that that is in fact needed. Now it's really time to go ahead and write up our project, maybe if we're doing Agile, we'll do our stories. If we're doing Waterfall, we're going to do our product requirement document. Right? I've worked on both sides and enjoyed both sides of that, so I don't have any kind of preference one way or another. It's in terms of picking the right methodology, it's whatever the team wants to do to be most effective, right? Like, I just don't care. Tell me how you want me to talk to you, and then I'll do that kind of thing, and I'll get my team to kind of work in that way as well. So, given that Agile is a bit more of a popular thing, and especially in software, I found that it does help to be quite clear on things like story formatting. So really drilling down to the detail now and saying, we're going to agree on a format of a story that, as a approved list of personas, these are the actual people that we're trying to pursue. We have developed profiles for them as a manager, the role of manager in my software, as a user, as a whatever, I see stories like, I want to, I'd like to, like, what does that mean? You're talking about defining an element of an actual business process. I can do something so that I get some result. So really being quite fastidious and persistent. Those final capture of specs are incredibly important, because just as you're getting into execution, sure, you've done a bit of brainstorming and you've come up with some prototypes and things like that. But now when it gets to actual build, it's just really important for that to be super clear, especially when working with teams of dozens of engineers where everyone's kind of working together on different components and it's all getting orchestrated together. A good story is also accompanied by acceptance criteria, so I'll literally get a document out, I'll write as a blah, or I can blah, so that whatever, and then I'll say as proven by 1, 2, 3, 4, because that feeds into the testing. It may be automated testing that the developers are building into that feature, that they actually need to also write up, and they need to be able to test what it is they're building against the outcomes that are desired. So, once whoever it is that's writing these specs, in some companies it might be a BA, business analyst, it might be a product owner, project manager, product manager, whoever it is. I think it's quite important to then, and this often happens in terms of sprint planning. So if the company's doing Agile and they're doing like sprints, like month-long sprints or whatever, 2-week sprints, they'll have their sprint planning session, sit down, read through all those stories with the engineering team, and actually, make sure that they're comfortable with that and the stories and understand them, because this is that handover to, the people that have now worked really hard to say, are we building the right product and how are we defining these problems? Now we're handing over to the team that's responsible for delivering the solution and building the thing. They need really clear specs. They need to accept the challenge and take ownership of these things. So, in terms of, in recent times, there's been a lot of sort of trends and kind of excitement around testing. We're going to test everything, we're going to crank it out, and it's going to be the result of the test, which gauges whether we keep this thing or how successful that thing is. And I think that it is critical that whatever is built, whether it be defined at a larger epic level, or this is a big component, or this module now we're adding on to this thing to do this new thing. What are we measuring, and how are we measuring it to ensure that thing is successful? It's met the mark, it actually has achieved its result. So identifying those metrics with, so in waterfall, that would be part of the product requirements document. These are the things that need to be measured. And once again, the engineering team might have to do extra work to build in the measurement for those things, but it's very important. I've spoken with product teams that I ask them, do you know if your features that you're delivering are hitting the mark? And they'll be like, we feel proud of the work we've done. We like the work we've done. I'm like, well, what are you measuring? How do you know it's working? So that's really important. I'm also seeing companies that go a bit in the diarrhea direction, in terms of they're just going to test whatever they can. Like I had a bit of a gripe with and for the most part, I admire what Domino's does with their mobile ordering and stuff. I think it's quite innovative. But sometimes I feel like they take their testing too far. And recently, for example, they removed their prices from their ordering website. And I was like, why? Why are you testing that? Like you're going to see an increase in orders, without pricing. It just doesn't seem right. So let's say we've built this thing now. We've taken it through. We've done our testing. We've gotten everyone across it. It's time to take this thing out there. And I really often see companies kind of not really thinking this through in terms of an integrated approach that spans across, the whole team working on this product, thinking of how are we actually going to take this thing out? It's someone else's problem. We've got a team for that, not necessarily. I feel like the person owning that product really needs to bring that together as part of the plan to say, well, what are we going to do to roll this out? Thinking about, once again, all those departments that you spoke to before build was actually commencing, now coming back and saying, hey guys, now it's your responsibility, you got to do this. So you go into the finance if there was some part that they needed to roll out, to measure, or definitely marketing. So often marketing now going back to them and saying, look, I'm going to hand this off to you and train you on this thing. You now have to, they're probably going to be driving in terms of the collateral that they're creating and so forth. But they have a part in that delivery, the creation of documentation for the support team to use, ensuring that's in place, the monitoring for the thing that's been built. How do we know it's still working? How do we know it's in situ for the customer and it's still running? What are we going to do when it stops running? Even thinking far ahead to say, is there going to be a time when we ultimately take this thing offline? Or if the metrics don't pan out, how are we going to actually roll this thing back and take it back off our customers and things like that? Thinking through that final sort of approach to that. So I've kind of just smashed out a sort of a mishmash of things here. In terms of just summary and tips to those who are entering into their journey of basic technical delivery, whatever mode, it's a few things. Once again, revisiting that concept of don't be worried about being obnoxious. Ask the hard questions. Really get to the bottom of the fundamentals, the goals, the vision, the mission, and ensure that the leadership is really across those frameworks, and let them know that you're interested and you care about those things. But once that is in place, definitely, along with the rest of the team, put you back into it and get stuff out for the customer. Also, find a group of people that cares about you. One of my bugbears almost is that a good team builds a good product, and it's getting a team together that cares about each other more than that product. That's actually really important, that will have a knock-on effect and a benefit to the customer ultimately when the team is pulling together and making stuff happen. In general, like the principle of focusing on one thing or in one area cannot be under promoted. So, I can see things throughout my career where if I had focused a bit more, instead of doing too many things, whether it be in my old company or what I'm doing now, or even in products, that concept of just focusing on the things that matter is important. And then the final thing would be network. Now, get out and meet other people in the community. This is really important. And for especially those in sort of the engineering sector, that can be a bit of a challenge when things get busy. But it is that network of people where they know, contacts get to know you, they get to know your strength, opportunities open up, and then, participating in those results in just betterment in general. So that's it for me. Thank you for having me.